Hello, this is Mark Stianoff, Specialist Search Headhunter in the Global Resources Market. So welcome to EHT Global Leadership Hero Journey. We're having an interview today with a leader in safety, taking the construction safety to a new level. Andy Goodey, let me introduce him. He's currently the Vice President of Health, Safety, Environment and Corporate Social Responsibility at DMC Mining Services. He's based in Toronto. He really is a world citizen. He's from the UK, worked there for many years, then moved to Poland, worked in Poland and the US, and for the last, I think, 7 years, he's based in Canada. So wonderful, good exposure, particularly in the construction sector, in the safety sector. Now, welcome, Andy.
Thank you.
Good to have you with us, and you've got some good views on where safety is at. I'd love to hear your thoughts on where do you feel the safety industry is at, particularly in construction and large projects.
Yeah, I mean, we've discussed it at length previously, and safety's gone through a massive transition. It's gone from being something that was always a second thought now to every company has it as a primary value, and so do we, as zero harm. I believe the transition of safety now needs to look at the next level of sustainability. So it's not just about reaching zero harm or reaching the sort of level of injury that's very minute or insignificant almost, that you get to a point where that's, sustainable over years of performance, so you don't get the peaks and troughs. And I think the industry's done a great job in making it that primary value of, making sure everybody's focusing on achieving it. Now we need to turn around and say, how do we sustain it? And that's a completely different conversation that I think the industry needs to get its head around.
Okay, so would you say, on that S-curve, we've kind of gone up the S-curve, improved, and now we've leveled off. We need a shift change.
Absolutely, and the challenge for us in industry right now is it's almost the obligations from legislation and from corporate systems and procedures that you're putting so much onto the supervisors that you have to be careful where you don't give over initiative. And what you're doing is detracting from the everyday performance and the processes that really do bring value in the workplace, as opposed to the initiatives taking the primary focus. Because then you have issues around not being compliant with legislation or the region you're operating in, and obviously then the focus just becomes a corporate deliverable, so it doesn't necessarily bring value right the way down to the end user, which is the worker. And that's the critical path that I think businesses are actually on right now, and that will lead to sustainability of performance, and ultimately getting to that value that you want and making sure that it continues to be delivered day after day, shift after shift.
Sure. Now, you've mentioned the interesting concept of celebrating failure compared to celebrating success. Tell me a little bit about this philosophy and maybe give some examples from your experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you have to look at the weight of industry. So if you first of all look at life in leading and lagging indicators, your leading and lagging performance metric, whenever an incident happens on a project or in a business within an organization, there is so much process that's mature around understanding what happened, why it happened, looking at preventative actions. It's almost like there's a massive energy around celebrating failure. And the risk is at that point is you're focusing on the output, you're focusing on what's happened, you're focusing on the severity and the potential impact to the business, that you're actually being very reactive, and all you're doing is managing the critical nature and the critical impact to that organization. What you're not doing is you're not focusing necessarily on prevention of reoccurrence and celebrating the success of the things that we do right in the everyday organization, which, if you think about the things that we do right in a context of money, you invest money so that you get a higher return back. So if you do the same with your successful actions, if you understand what brings success, you understand what you did which delivered the successful shift or the successful day, and then you reinvest that and do it again and again, ultimately you'll get a better return on your investment. But if you look at investing time and energy around the things that went wrong, is that going to bring you your return on investment that you really want? Or are you actually just staring at the thing that's happened, the output, and it's not going to change because you've not done anything different?
Mm-hmm. So is this a way, the celebrating of success is a way to get that culture, this elusive safety culture that you're talking about?
That's right.
Tell me how you've done that. I mean, give me some examples from your experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Celebration of success for us is about understanding every day your lessons learned process, but your lessons learned process is based around the successful things that have occurred within any particular shift. So instead of spending the time and energy walking around just identifying things that were wrong and addressing undesired behavior, what you're actually doing is you're identifying champions in the workplace, you're identifying successful actions within the workplace of where it went right. So, for instance, we use software now in analytics within organizations. Instead of looking at the software as compliance data, you're actually looking at the software data as in recognition of success. So when you have a supervisor or you have a worker that overperforms or over-delivers, you spend the time to identify what it was that they did, the return on investment, that you had no injuries or you had no undesired outcomes during that shift. And you understand the correlation between the two, and then you identify that in front of peers, you identify that in front of other colleagues within the workplace, so that it really does become a celebration of success. Rather than when something goes wrong, like an incident report, you bring that forward in front of the same group, and you spend a lot of time talking about a very negative thing, a very negative impact, and everybody's head goes down, which then becomes the celebration of failure.
Got you, yes. Yeah. No, that's a powerful, I mean, rather be positive and drive it on a positive note. Obviously, it's preventative, but by positive actions you prevent, which is the point.
Well, that's right. And when you look at the organization, if we were truly honest with ourselves, how much time we put into things and understanding when it went wrong is the things that we did right. How many times do you see a manager or a leader within the organization going around and giving recognition to the workers versus somebody giving recognition of, as soon as something goes wrong, the first thing we do is we measure the time that people react and say that's not fast enough. And it becomes almost like a habit, it becomes a behavior within the organization that the first person to know about something that went wrong is actually, in the control position. But in actual fact, if we just did that in reverse and we turned around and said, how quickly do we understand that things went right? So we celebrate, like, for instance, great days. You have a shift, there was no incidents, there was no unplanned events that went wrong, we didn't have any near misses. That should be the celebration of success around that great day.
Mm-hmm. And how long have you applied this concept, and how have you seen the change in people?
Yeah, so we started this process about 2 years ago when I joined the organization I'm with now. I mean, in every organization you work for, you take your own core principles and values. And I think it's something that I've seen change over the past few years, where organizations have almost got a bit stale in the way that they respond to and how they build their cultures. People talk about building a culture around process and procedures. I think it's more than that. It's about actually understanding behaviors and understanding what behavior you really want to have in the workplace, so that in the morning you take time to find the common ground with your colleague. How was your weekend? Good. There's a reason why you have that conversation and you ask that question, because what you're creating is you're removing barriers and you're creating a common place that two people can have a conversation. Then you talk about the work deliverable. All of a sudden it becomes more comforting to talk around the things that necessarily are more difficult to talk about, because you've already established that common ground. It really does go back to even the smallest detail of that, in understanding what culture do you want. People meet each other with a smile rather than a frown. A manager turns around to his team and says, hey, everybody, just want to open the conversation with a really good moment about something good that happened. We talk about opening conversations with safety shares. which are normally, oh, did everybody hear about the fatality that just occurred? Straight away, the negative connotation. It brings the conversation into the place where you don't want it to be. It's great that you learn from your mistakes, but it's more important that you have that positive momentum and you understand what went right so that you can then replicate it.